Hey, Moon here. I know I've been more behind the scenes lately, but today I wanted to share with you a personal story. Not to make you feel like you need to believe what I'm saying, but just to share how I got into looking into such crazy, nonsensical bullshit. The story goes into questioning religion and alternative ideas, so if you think that that kind of information is harmful to your psyche or your religious views, then stop watching now. I'm just telling my experience. As a child, I was always asking questions. My mother was a Jehovah's Witness, and the family she married into were Methodists. My mother's mother was a strict Pentecostal, and while she's deeply kind and caring, she could be overzealous at times. I would go to church on Saturday to the Kingdom Hall. It was very serious, everyone was really polite and respectful, and we attended memorial every year. On Sunday, I would go to the Methodist church with my grandma and grandpa, and they were overall pretty jolly, but they could get serious too. My Sunday school teacher actually told my class that if we didn't pray for all our friends and family, that bad things would happen to them. During Easter Sunday, instead of hunting for Easter eggs with the rest of the children, she made us make crosses out of nails and wire by candlelight while she talked to us about the bloody sacrifice of Jesus Christ in vivid detail. On Wednesdays, we had the Jehovah's Witnesses come over for study. I had a study booklet that I would have to answer questions in like an extra school assignment. They talked about Jehovah and how he would only save 144,000 virgins to rule in the kingdom of heaven, knowing full well it would not be them. Mothers and fathers were teaching me this information, so they embraced the judgment day, I guess, and they showed many images to me and my siblings of fire raining from an orange sky, people floating away from their loved ones, dead people on the ground, babies crying, animals thrashing, truly horrific images. And when I would visit my grandmother out of state, she took me to Pentecostal church. Here they would scream and cry and moan for God, the pastor yelling at the top of his lungs and the choir singing so loud, children being forced to take in this Holy Spirit by their parents who spoke in tongues with sweat rolling down their faces. It was truly traumatizing to my cousins and I, and we were shamed if we didn't play along. I always felt less than excited if I had to be in any situation where someone was on stage focusing energy and people were crying and screaming, and until I started going to concerts, which are basically the same thing as a regular Sunday at any megachurch in 2019, just different people on the stages. All those religious experiences, and I still couldn't understand God or the motives of God. I started to hate God because all the terrible things that I read about in the various Bibles I was forced to study. Jesus was a necromancer, bringing people back from the dead, and Jehovah killed everyone on earth, well, most of the people on earth, because they just weren't worth saving. And to be qualified for that, you had to be perfect and not sin. Even Canaan, the son of Noah, was cursed for the sin of seeing his father naked by mistake and then laughing about it and telling his brothers, demonstrating that even the most minor of sins are detrimental and cannot be avoided. And even though the world was destroyed, sin still lived. It was unavoidable. Even an accident can be a sin, and we inherit our parents' sin. God hates those who sin. Yeah? So he hates basically everyone. Yet we have Moses, who had a serpentine staff that allowed him to part the seas and turn water to blood. King Solomon had a magic ring that allowed him to control demons, which I didn't understand at that young age. The Bible said, "Thou shalt not kill." Yet people in the Bible kill all the time. Animals are sacrificed. People were slain in the name of God. It made no sense. Demons and angels were another question entirely. If they were demons and angels and they were immortal, where are they today? My mother told me that aliens were demons, and my grandmother told me that demons came from bad things like Harry Potter, anime, and tight blue jeans. She said that the demons still walk the earth, and she would tell me bedtime stories about the Antichrist and Revelations, sowing fear into my young, impressionable mind. All with the best intentions. I'm sure she felt a lot like me right now, trying to tell people these things that just sound completely insane. Kind of funny how the tables have turned. The difference is here, you're not young children, and you can decide for yourself what you believe, and I'm not saying these things to invoke fear. I was afraid myself, for my soul, for my salvation, I would have nightmares about revelations and would often lie awake at night praying for everyone I knew for forgiveness for sinning on accident or on purpose. I was completely controlled by 3 different belief systems, and even more confused when I learned there were more religions. Eventually, I started going to school where I learned about space and the planets. So the world was no longer a 3-layer cake of heaven, earth, and hell that I had been told about. Imagine my relief when my 7th grade science teacher told us that God wasn't real. This world was a ball full of molten magma, and the gravity held the water to this ball. Got it. Also, there were other spheres that floated around in space that were made up of rock, fire, gas, and water in our solar system. Then the Bible became mythology to me and my classmates, right alongside Homer and Plato. In science and history class, we were taught the true history of humanity. Videos and animations of dinosaurs roaming the earth, and then a comet from outer space coming and destroying them all. Then randomly life begins again, and this time monkeys are the smartest animal on the planet, and only some of them randomly become smarter. Some think they began eating magic mushrooms. And then bam, these monkeys stopped climbing trees and started walking on 2 legs, and their descendants did the same thing, and they just bred their own separate colony of smarter monkeys until eventually they built homes and made tools. Their bodies shed the unnecessary hair, their faces and bodies changed completely, and they began speaking in Sumerian. Then the idea that aliens intervened in our creation was presented to me through the Earth Chronicles and the show Ancient Aliens. The concept really interested me as I'd always deeply feared these aliens, and this explanation made the aliens and our creation seem to be related, making both subjects somehow less scary. I'm just a slightly smarter monkey. No god with a long white beard was watching my every move, despite that ever-present feeling of being watched. But wait, the world was still going to end in an Armageddon situation. Yes, just like it did for the dinosaurs and creatures of the Ice Age. The icebergs melt, the sun's gonna get way too hot before eventually going cold unless we nuke each other to death or all die in a race war. That is, if our planet, which floats precariously in an empty, deadly vacuum called space, doesn't get destroyed by a rogue ice chunk. Immediately, fear sets in again. That's what it's designed to do, just like a religion. This time, though, I was able to get rid of that fear by trying my best to learn the topics and understand them. After all, there was no sin factor making me insignificant. Everyone is insignificant in the eyes of science. So I watched all the space and history programs, every single one of them as I could, and I was still left with no real answer. I read Carl Sagan's Contact and Pale Blue Dot and found them devastating, and I just went with it. Yes, we are all so small and insignificant, and only the greatest of men can grasp the complexity of what we call life, even though we all have one. And we must trust them for the sake of our future. While reading Sitchin's Earth Chronicles, I finally felt like I was getting some answers on things like European megaliths and pyramids and the UFO sightings like Roswell and Betty and Barney Hill. I started reading books like Ender's Game and started watching Star Wars. I bought books on aliens and decorated my room with posters and planets. It was a done deal. I was a part of the Church of Science. Now, my grandpa was more of a father to me than his son was. He had addiction problems that made him unfit for parenting, and he was in and out of jail and rehab. So my grandfather would do his darndest to instill good Christian ideals in me. I rebelled often. I liked boys and anime and rock music, and besides, God did some evil shit, and I'd read about these so-called holy wars. Mix that together with my regular dose of how the universe works and history's mysteries. I wasn't buying the Christian narrative. I still don't buy it completely, but I've decided that the many variations of the Bible are not what it was originally intended to be, so they cannot be fully trusted. I do find value in some of it, and I know a few Christians who are some of the most genuine and caring people I've ever known. My grandpa was the best of them. He always treated people with respect, even if he completely disagreed with them. He would go out of his way for people who were considered sinners because he believed that he was just as much of a sinner as they were, and that everyone had great potential to grow and become better. He was always forgiving when he was wronged. I say this because I feel like I wronged him in the only true argument we ever got into. One weekend, I was asking him questions about his work. He was an electrical engineer, a term I didn't really understand at the time of the argument. I just knew he built jets and rockets and worked with radar. I knew he'd recently gone to work at the infamous Area 51, and naturally saw this as an opportunity to learn some insider information. I was buzzing with questions. I asked him if there were any space aliens, or are there any alien spaceship parts or crafts, and he looked at me and he just said that there were no space aliens. I began to retort, citing the books I'd read about abductions and CIA documents that I'd seen presented to me on TV. He looked at me and he said not to believe everything that I see on TV. So I said, okay, forget the TV. You don't think that out of the millions and billions of other planets and stars out there, there's no other intelligence? He simply said to me that there were millions and billions of other planets. I was so confused that I asked him again, what did you say? He said, this is all there is. I've been up as high as you can go. I would know. I looked at him with my eyebrows all wrinkled up and said, what about space and the planets and everything I've ever learned in school? I asked about NASA and the rockets, and he said, oh yeah, they were real rockets, but they weren't going into outer space. He said that they couldn't do it. I sat there for a moment and asked, how can you think this? We landed on the moon. My grandma was a teacher in school. She taught the same stuff we teach today. He sort of rolled his eyes a little bit and said, I know what they teach there. They also teach evolution. I was aware of his views on evolution from an early age after becoming interested in things like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, which used terms like evolve and had gods on them. I always just kind of ignored his comments. I got upset and I told him that I thought he was confused and misguided. He was 65 years old and I was 16. I've only been on passenger planes, and he's built high-altitude jets, been to Area 51, and works with the Pentagon. I realize now why he was so secretive at times, always locking the door to his office and spending hours on the phone or on Skype video chats. I would sometimes wait for him impatiently, but I never heard anyone else's voice, of course. He just used a headset. I know he wrote instruction books on bombers like the B-1B Lancers, and he wrote books on electronic countermeasures, which I read about, and is an electrical or electronic device designed to trick or deceive radar, sonar, or other detection systems like infrared, according to Wikipedia. So, just learned about that. Despite all this, I was adamant that I was right and he was wrong. After all, he was a Christian, and there was just too much wrong with Christianity for me to believe anything taught by their doctrine. I ended the conversation, and he told me if I had any more questions to ask him, to which I just rolled my eyes and went to waste my time with some handheld video game. I never did ask about it again. He passed away many years ago, so when I heard the idea of Flat Earth again, I was upset. I was still clinging to the comfort of this world being a random accident, and everything that we did had no true meaning. The idea of a God-created world was still taboo for me and the people around me. I was so resistant to the information that I completely ignored it on YouTube, and it kept popping up based on other videos I was already watching, and curiosity eventually got the best of me as my grandfather's words echoed in my head. And I looked into it and I dug deep. And then I thought, why would they show something like ancient aliens on television if it was so conspiratorial or secretive? After reading books like A Brave New World, 1984, The Time Machine, and looking into different leaders in science, realizing they were occultists, it became obvious that the media, science, religion, politics, and academia are all just different cults, and they're all fighting over the most important commodity: us, our minds, maybe even our souls. Knowledge is power, so whoever controls the knowledge controls the power. Divide and conquer is their grand strategy, and that's why there's so many subcults or subcultures. It's as if we humans are afraid to be without some kind of belief structure or something to give our devotion to. It's like we don't want to be in charge of our own minds, and without some kind of construct we won't be able to tell the difference between good or evil. If this is the case, then why is it that the leaders of our most trusted or good institutions Churches, Christian, Catholic, Jehovah's Witnesses, Jewish, all have been accused of harming people and innocent children and doing the most evil acts of all. The same goes for many people in your favorite Hollywood films. The politicians, the bigwigs, the billionaires, the lobbyists, they've all been accused of dreadful crimes against humanity's most innocent souls. Yet we still bow to them, buy their books, vote for them, post their images on our walls, watch their nasty music videos, and preach their cosmology in our schools. If you can't see that the whole shebang is just messed up, then you're sick and you're in denial, and this denial is continuing this cycle of pain and despair by not acknowledging these points. We talk about how we need to protect people by banning hashtags, and that's just the least of our problems. I think that the reason a lot of people don't want to look into conspiracies is because they're afraid of what they're going to find, and it's just so much easier to accuse people of being crazy and try to silence them by shaming them. When in reality, I'm just like a lot of you. I grew up in the public school system, went to church, watched the same shows on television. I had questions that I never felt were answered. Simple questions like, where do we come from and why are we here? And doesn't it seem weird that this is like some big topic of controversy? Such a touchy topic that people can't even talk about to their family members without it becoming some kind of ongoing joke in the family. Doesn't seem opposite of this whole support anyone and everyone who's different or oppressed movement. So I guess that doesn't include anybody who believes in any alternative cosmology. They actually deserve to be oppressed for their wild and insane beliefs. It's taboo to even talk about an alternative cosmology in an unbiased light, yet stories like this welcome you on your morning talk show. A 50-something-year-old man is allowed to leave his 7 children and his wife and pretend that he is a 6-year-old girl, get adopted, and live with a whole nother family. And we're expected to accept this delusion. People can live their lives pretending that they're a dog or a sex slave or even a baby. We have music videos that glorify pedophilia and that are killing, and they're aired on television. But God forbid you bring up alternative cosmologies. It's not about censoring us to keep our minds safe. If that were the case, we wouldn't be shown such brutality and disgusting images. It's right in front of our eyes every day. Our eyes and the eyes of our children, and we just let it be because that's just how the world is now. Well, I just think you should second guess it. I think you should take a look at everything, and even if it breaks your world, but take a look at your world. Flat Earth, round Earth, hollow Earth, torus Earth, I don't know. I know that the source of where we get our information is not to be trusted, and the reasons are right before our eyes if we choose to look at it. That's all one needs to do. There's not that much to understand. Every day we boast about being at the pinnacle of humanity, but who is we? Because according to statistics, we're killing ourselves off and dying from disease at an alarming rate. They always talk about how much better off we are today, yet isolated tribes rarely, if ever, see illnesses like cancer, obesity, or addiction. And addiction doesn't just mean drugs either. Many of us are addicted to food, television, social media, sex, pornography, video games, plastic toys. We literally give our soul to these things, all of our money that we work so hard for. And I'm not saying that there's anything inherently wrong with these things. I've spent many hours in virtual worlds, but less so lately, and it's because I can no longer ignore what's wrong with the whole of this world anymore. You can say that I'm being negative or looking at it from the wrong perspective, and if I'm just saying that whoever's in charge of the flow with mainstream information is manipulating the consciousness of the human mind, allowing us to become blind and insensitive to atrocities. If we bury ourselves in a 15-book series about death and destruction, we won't notice all the deaths and destruction around us. Makes sense? There are so many people here on YouTube trying to bring these disturbing facts to light. Doesn't that say something? Why would we dedicate our lives, potentially ruin our reputations, just to speak out about some nonsense? I love how everyone refers to Copernicus and how he was so brave for going against what was said by the church, but when the partogram shifts again, they scoff and do exactly what the Christians of old did. those who focus on the pure aspect of us even bringing up the topic of flat Earth are truly missing the information. The purpose of this information is to make you question the world around you once again like you did when you were a child and life was still mysterious. Because it never stopped being mysterious. The only thing is there's a dark side to that mystery, so we shun it and push it away out of our minds. Well, I'm done, because in the process of ignoring this, we've ignored all the pain and suffering of others. None of us are free until we're all free.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?